So COP28 is over and you're probably wondering what exactly was the outcome? How does it affect you? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do in this episode. We're going to do a run through of my highlights of COP28 and also what exactly came out of it in terms of the report, but more specifically what it means for you as an African. My name is Sellah Bogonko, co-founder and CEO Jacob's Ladder Africa, and this is Green Jobs Africa. So just to give a bit of a recap of why COP was happening, so that for those of you who've not been able to catch the previous series, you'll be able to understand. But if you want a more detailed breakdown, please do visit the previous episodes for you to understand. So COP28 happened in Dubai, and it just is concluding because even after the official timeline that was given, there's usually still a spillover, which is still happening to allow the negotiating parties to arrive at consensus on critical issues that are supposed to be captured. And that report is so critical that it determines basically the way forward as far as the nations agreeing on the areas that are going to be addressed in terms of climate change. And so you're probably wondering, okay, so what exactly happened in COP28? You didn't attend, or you did attend, but it was a bit, all over the place for you. And you're wondering, okay, give me a run through of what exactly the outcome is and what the highlights are. Before we get into that, we'd like to go back and review what exactly Dubai wanted to achieve. And they had four main objectives. The first one was to discuss climate finance, which was a major issue. And if you remember from the previous episodes, we discussed issues to do with the global finance infrastructure, the loss and damage fund. And those are things that there was hope that Dubai would create a forum to be able to address those kind of issues, and that this COP would be able to give that opportunity for the climate finance to be addressed. The second one was on energy, because energy is a big deal. As we all know, 75% of the greenhouse gas emissions are caused by fossil fuels, and fossil fuel also contributes 90% of the carbon dioxide that is emitted into the atmosphere. So energy is going to be a big deal. And of course, because of the region that was hosting COP28, it was definitely going to feature big time, and we'll come to that on exactly what happened. The third one was that they were hoping that climate action would be more inclusive, meaning that more parties would be involved in the understanding, awareness, involvement, and also addressing or bringing solutions to the table as far as climate change is concerned. And then the last one was to make it the most inclusive COP ever. If you attended, we'd like to hear from you. Do you think this was the most inclusive COP ever? And what were your thoughts and views, experiences? What are the challenges? What are the challenges that you experienced, or what are the exciting moments that you had? Well, I was there, and I have my own views, which I'll be sharing at the end of this episode today. But for now, let's look at what exactly are the major outcomes of COP28. So like I mentioned, there was what Dubai wanted to achieve, or the UAE wanted to achieve, and then there was what was being looked at as the issues that would come out of this particular COP. For the first time ever, there was a focus on climate finance, and there was quite a bit of interesting conversations, and not just in the rooms, but also at the global stage in terms of the main arena, in terms of the negotiations. Climate finance featured quite a bit. There was a push to put in money, and not just money in form of loans, because most of the countries that require this climate finance are countries that also have their own challenges when it comes to development. They are developing nations. So giving them loans to address climate change is not necessarily helping them. So there's been a push to come up with innovative ways to be able to address the issue of climate finance, to allow developing countries to develop in a more resilient way. And that basically means to make sure that there's no stopping the normal development while you're addressing the issues of climate in terms of going renewable energy, for example, at the expense of maybe building schools or roads, which is what most of these developing countries need in this stage of their growth process. And so loss and damage fund was a big one. In terms of climate finance was a big one, but more specifically, loss and damage fund featured. And on the first day of COP, which was day one, the UAE did a landmark announcement, which was to fund their own, or rather to give their own contribution towards the loss and damage fund. And there were other countries that also came to the table, like the UK, Germany, and the US, also contributed to the loss and damage fund. Now, the loss and damage fund is a big deal because for the first time, it's actually gotten to the point of not just commitments or agreeing that it's an issue, but actually getting funded. So last year, this was the final thing that was agreed in Dubai, in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27. And so for the last 12 months, there's been many meetings, 5 meetings in particular that have happened to address the issue of the loss and damage fund, which means to agree on how exactly is it going to be funded? Who is supposed to fund it? How is it going to be managed? And on day 1 of COP28, there was an announcement about the loss and damage fund, and there was quite a bit of contribution, like I mentioned, and the agreement by the parties was that the World Bank would be able to manage that particular fund. There's a bit of concern there in terms of who's going to get the money. What is the criteria that is being used? So there's quite a bit of work that still needs to be done, but we do need to be able to celebrate the progress that has been made so far in achieving a loss and damage fund in the first place, and also getting quite a bit of commitment. And so at by day 12 rather, there was 792 million that had been committed into the fund, which is great in terms of commitment, but we do hope that it will actually translate to money that will go towards the countries. And of course, this is a drop in the ocean compared to what is required. So there's a lot of hope and also comments and engagements that there's need for more, especially for developed countries to do more. The second thing that featured was methane. And I know this one probably hasn't gotten the spotlight that it deserves, but it is a big deal. Next to CO2, methane is also one of the highest greenhouse gases. And so it featuring prominently in this COP was a big deal, because there was a need to be able to address not just CO2, but also methane in particular, and have technology that is geared towards reducing methane emissions into the atmosphere. And so that was a major thing that came out of this COP as well. So the third thing that featured prominently in this COP is the global stocktake. And as I mentioned in a previous episode, this COP was important because for the first time there was a review of the Paris Agreement, which happened in 2015, which was an agreement that brought together more concise and very audacious goals. That's where the 1.5 degrees, limiting the global warming by 1.5 degrees also came up. And that has been termed as the North Star, the guiding light in terms of what we ought to be working towards. And so everything else really is working towards that particular goal. The global stocktake then is a review of how far, because that's supposed to be like until 2030. But every 5 years, there's been a commitment to review the Paris Agreement, which means that the first 5 years came to an end, but the review takes 2 years. And this is the moment at which there was now a report, or there's supposed to be a report from this particular COP to say, this is how well we're doing as far as the 1.5 North Star or 1.5 degree objective or goal is concerned. And then the other things like carbon markets and carbon reduction globally and all that stuff. And so the global stocktake then becomes a determinant or a sort of like a report form to tell us how well we're doing. And so this was also an opportunity for countries to reset their goals. The reason for the global stocktake is to say, we're not doing too well in this area, perhaps we need to change tact or change strategy. And that's what exactly was happening during the last 2 years. And the report from this particular COP is supposed to reflect the discussions that have been going on as a review of the Paris Agreement. And so that was also a big deal. And that report will be the final outcome of this COP, and that's what everyone is waiting for. And one of the features, which now brings me to my fourth point, one of the features that is being awaited for, perhaps has even overshadowed everything else, is the fossil fuels. And like I said in a previous episode, because of the nature of the UAE hosting, because they're large global oil producers, the president who was appointed as the head or as the president of COP28 is also the head of the association or oil company. And so there was a lot of contradiction or seeming controversy around the appointment and then also around the country hosting. And so there's been a lot of global pressure to make sure that the issue of fossil fuels is captured in the global stocktake report and of course the outcome of this COP28. And it seems to be featuring so much that it's actually determining the success or failure of this particular COP. And the reason why it's a big deal is because in the IPCC report, it's been captured clearly that there's need to actually completely remove the production of coal, as a source of energy by 2050. And then there's also been a push to be able to reduce oil and gas, oil by 60% and then gas by 40% by 2050 as well. And that has been contentious because in this particular COP, there's been a push to not just say that we are going to reduce, but to actually significantly phase out. And some have said phase out, and you'll hear these comments, especially on the internet or in the news, that every single word in the IPCC report means something, whether it's and, a conjunction, or could, or should. They mean something because, like in Constitution, those words carry so much weight that they determine what can and cannot be done. And so one of the things that's being awaited for is obviously the global stocktake report, but in particular how the word fossil fuels is going to be captured. The fifth thing for me that came out of COP is the feature on green jobs, in the sense that there was a pavilion that was dedicated to green livelihoods, and which was exciting because apparently there's not been as much focus in the past on green jobs. And so for me, who's in this space, and for us as Jacob's Ladder, it's an exciting thing to have a dedicated platform for green jobs, and the need to be able to amplify that in all these investments, in all these conversations, in all these policy decisions that are being made at the global level. We have to be able to make sure that they translate to jobs at the end of the day. And so the other thing that came up out of this COP is carbon dioxide removals, or CDR as it's called. There was a whole dedication of various events, amazing events, showcase of technology that is emerging or is already being implemented on addressing the issue of carbon removals. It's a big deal because a lot of the efforts that have gone towards the conversation so far over the previous COPs have always been about carbon reduction, which is things like we need to face down, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, climate smart agriculture, etc. But then when it comes to carbon removals, it's actual technology that actively removes the carbon, whether through technology or nature-based solutions, actively removes the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And so that featuring prominently in this particular COP is a major deal, especially because technology is a way of us being able to significantly achieve the milestones that are required when it comes to the global decarbonization objective or goals that we have set for ourselves. And so those are some of the things that I picked out. I would love to hear what you picked out, if you attended or if you've been sort of like following the COP discussions. What are some of the things that stood out for you? And so there you have it. Those are some of the major areas that came out of this particular COP. I'd love to hear from you if you were present. What was your experience like? I know a lot of people were saying that they lost weight just walking around because of how massive it was. I can attest to that. I don't mind the work, so I enjoyed myself quite a bit. And it also gave me an opportunity to be able to interact with different people and meet all sorts of people from across the globe, which was absolutely fantastic and very refreshing. What was your experience like? I would love to hear from you. So thank you for joining me today. Should you have comments, experiences, questions, please do put them in the comment section below and we'll definitely get back to you. And also create that interaction to allow you to share your perspective, your view, and also your feedback, because we'd love to hear what you think of this particular episode, and if you think there's something that we missed out on that you would like us to capture in subsequent episodes. My name is Sellah Bogonko, co-founder and CEO Jacob's Ladder Africa, and this is Green Jobs Africa.